I know this will probably not get read, and even if it does, you don't have to believe me. I'm writing this merely for myself, as a way of keeping my sanity. So it was some time in April last year that I first started applying for jobs to fund my university studies. I would lie awake in my dark dorm room at night, going through ad after ad after ad, applying to the ones that interest me. Although I was majoring in engineering at George Mason University, any sort of work with a little income to help my studies was fine. After all, beggars can't be choosers. Days and nights went by with the same response. "Sorry, unfortunately your CV does not match our criteria," or "The job you have applied for has already been filled." In the midst of an economic depression, I began to wonder if I was ever going to get a reply. With this in mind, I decided to do something I never thought of previously, and instead of online applications, I started looking at ads in local newspapers and notice boards in town. One early morning, in May, I was out in town with a few friends going for a nice drink after a hard day of tedious lecturing. It was a Friday, and we were all relieved that the weekend had arrived. On the way to the cafe, I noticed a newspaper on an empty bench by the sidewalk. I wanted to know the football fixtures for the weekend, so I picked it up and looked at the sports section. Although looking for jobs had almost completely left my mind by then, I decided to have a quick glance at the job vacancy section for the hell of it. As I skimmed through the ads, I happened to stumble upon a particular ad that did catch my eye. It read, "Discreet assistance required. Meet outside Virginia Square Metro Station at 1 p.m. May 4th for more information on what will be required." The colours of the ad and clarity seemed to be blurred out of line, but I simply put this down to printing press and technical faults. Yet, it stood out. Intrigued, I took a mental note. As I turned to join my friends after casting the paper aside, a glimpse of the words, "7-year-old girl missing," caught the corner of my eye, but I merely ignored it as it had no concern to my welfare. I went back to my dorm that evening, thinking about the ad I'd seen earlier and questioned its legitimacy. The way it was written was very profound. What did it mean by discreet assistance? May the 4th was tomorrow, Saturday. Tired from lectures, I decided to hit the sack and sleep on the decision whether to go to the station tomorrow. Awakened by my roommate Liam, it was midday, and the only sleep I got had lasted for an hour or so. Liam woke me up saying I'd been screaming in my sleep. The strange thing is, I have no recollection of having any dreams that night. Just a void blackness in my mind. The ad had been on my mind all night, and in order to conquer its enigma, I hopped on the bus to take the short journey down to the station. Thankfully, outside the station there happened to be many people, and this did give me some assurance. I would never have done it if it wasn't in broad daylight and busy. As the clock struck precisely 1 p.m, a harsh but soft voice whispered in my ear, a voice that contradicted itself in its very nature. I couldn't explain it. It was as if his soul had been sucked from him and his lifeless words were creeping into my eardrums. My heart sank and I soon realised I should never have done this. He uttered the words,
"Come, there is much to be learned. You may call me the Professor."
I had no intention of doing so, and had no idea what he meant. As I turned to face the mystery man, I blacked out. Writing now, it was as if the sound of his voice and its frequency caused my brain to shut down unwillingly. I awoke to the strong smell of antiseptics and sterile equipment, the walls painted white but with hints of ruptured plaster towards the top. The lights flickered above me as my vision finally began to clarify, and the sound of the footsteps echoed down the hard marble floor towards me. To my dismay, I had been restrained by leather straps and my freedom to move had gone. This feeling of utter hopelessness overwhelmed me. I had no idea what had happened to me. I started to panic and tears streamed down my face. Visions of my family were vivid in my mind, how I wished I could be with them now, home, safe and secure.
Now, there is nothing to worry about. Trust me, you are doing a big favour to mankind by being here,
said the Professor. It was then when I finally realised the appearance of my nightmare. Dressed in a white cloak with the look of a surgeon or a scientist, he had deep-set, cold, heartless eyes which flickered, darting unintentionally from side to side. The most prominent feature of all was a weird, mould-coloured growth somewhat like a tumour on the right side of his forehead. "Please, what's going on? Let me go." I heard no reply. Suddenly, a slight prick rippled through my body, starting from my left arm. I had been injected. It was around this time things started to get weirder. I could hear the screaming of a small girl down the hallway, sobbing, crying for her mother. At the same time, she was laughing, or at least I thought she was. I couldn't quite make out the distinction. I started laughing myself. I couldn't help it. I literally let out a big laugh, although inside I felt completely dead and sombre. What the hell had this man done to me? He just watched over me, grinning at the outcome of his injection.
This is a cruel world to be living in, my friend. In order to true your being, you need to smile.
After this, all I heard of the professor was his crude voice reciting Bible verses and chillingly singing church hymns. He crouched over the bed which I was strapped to, and loomed over me, screeching verses of the fucking Bible directly into my ear.
Do you believe in euthanasia, son of Adam?
Huh? I replied, so freaked out I could barely make sense of anything. He took a gun out of a drawer by his surgical utensils, cocked it, and placed it in my unrestrained hand. He brought out the girl that had been screaming next door and stood her next to me. She was unwillingly smiling in what would ultimately be her death. Was this the assistance required of me?
If you do this, you go free. However, the blood of this little girl will be forever on your conscience and haunt your dreams. Her ghost will wander around your dorms forever, lifeless, but still smiling. If you, however, choose not to participate, I will shoot her, and you will be forced to eat the remains of her body. After this, you will go free.
He sang. I realised that this must be the 7-year-old girl whose story was written in the abandoned newspaper yesterday afternoon. Not concerned with her welfare, I ignored the story and threw the paper aside. I was now deciding whether or not to shoot her in the head or eat her remains after the professor shoots her. Either way, it seemed she would die. I wish I could spare everyone reading this pasta, the next part of the story, and completely skip it, but, as I said at the start, in order to keep my sanity I need to recite every part of the story.
"It's okay,"
the girl said.
"I am a hollow shell void of everything. There is no place on this earth that could be worse than this. The things this man has done to me should never happen to anyone."
The weird thing was, the girl was talking like an adult. The look you usually see in a child's eyes was completely taken, as she was practically begging to be shot by me. I would be lying if I said I'd not thought about killing the professor, but for some strange reason, I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was as if he'd planted a subliminal message in my mind and had control over my emotions. In hysterics and still confused by the whole situation, I began aiming the gun sight at the child. She was gonna die either way, and although if it was him to shoot her, I would still have to eat from the dead corpse, and that would haunt me far worse than shooting her. Still laughing from the injection, I proceeded to bring myself to put a bullet in this little girl's brain. Whilst this was going on, I just became aware of this. The professor was filming everything on a JVC camcorder. The song, Happy Together by the Turtles, was also quietly getting louder leading up to its climax. I was almost deafened. I shot her still smiling.
The dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me. So happy together.